last night, I get sent an article with a link to the newsroom of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons in Salt Lake City. And most of you know that this ministry began. I mean, our first primary focus was on Mormonism, 1983. And our first tracks on the subject and all of our missions trips and everything were focused on Mormonism. And years of driving up I-17 to Flagstaff and 89 up through Page and all that fun stuff getting up to Salt Lake City. And then the return trips where you're now exhausted. And I don't know how many times, some angel undoubtedly took over the wheel just to keep us from dying. Anyway, Mormonism has been a major element of what we have focused upon. And so the changes in Mormonism that we have observed, because my first conversation with Mormon missionaries was in 1982. I had actually talked with some Mormons in 1980, but I had no idea what was going on. So I read some books after that, not necessarily the best books. But the first full-length Mormon missionary conversation, which eventually led to Alpha and Omega Ministries, was July of 82. And I realized most of the people in the audience were not alive in July of 1982. What? Oh, yeah, over 40 years ago. Mormonism has changed amazingly in 40 years. And most Mormons, older Mormons my age, know that. And they struggle with it. The young missionaries don't know that. But men my age, women my age, they know. They can remember the confidence that Mormonism had in proclaiming itself to be the one true church. The moral and ethical collapse in the stances of the LDS Church going on in Utah are just astonishing. What's going on at BYU? And the collapse on LGBTQ issues, that's what is amazing. Because I was there when the first protests outside General Conference took place and the gay Mormons showed up. That was in the 90s. And it's like they've become goo. There never really was a backbone. There's always been a strong subjective element, but at least back in the 80s, you always had the, well, I believe it's true because I have a testimony thing, but they would argue about historical stuff. There wasn't any seer stone, blah, blah, blah. Well, now we have the seer stone and all that stuff you're talking about, it's all anti-Mormon stuff that's been made up. Well, now all of it's been documented and the church admits it. And so back then, there was still a desire to try to say that there was a real historical foundation, for example, to the Book of Mormon. But there's a lot of Mormons now today that are adopting all this spiritualization and all this stuff to try to say, well, no, not really. And, they just become really, really squishy. And that's reflecting what's happening in Salt Lake City. So I read this last night. This was released on November 15th, so yesterday. The doctrine of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints related to marriage between a man and a woman is well known and will remain unchanged. We are grateful for the continuing efforts of those who work to ensure the Respect for Marriage Act includes appropriate religious freedom protections while respecting the law and preserving the rights of our LGBTQ brothers and sisters. We believe this approach is the way forward as we work together to preserve the principles and practices of religious freedom together with the rights of LGBTQ individuals much can be accomplished to heal relationships and foster greater understanding. Remember, this is an act that will fundamentally destroy the very definition of marriage. Now, some people have said, oh, this is easy. This act will open the door, inevitably, just as Obergefell did, to polygamy. And so that's what they want. They want polygamy back. No, they do not. No, they do not. I think Salt Lake City is terrified of the idea of polygamy. I think they're terrified of it. This is just simply a bunch of old men who have no worldview, because there is no meaningful, the only objective elements of LDS worldview was what it took from the Bible and from Christianity. And the LDS Scriptures, Book of Mormon, again, it's just someone trying to make something sound like the Bible. Joseph Smith had no concept of worldview. And since the Mormon doctrine of God is simply incoherent, it is a form of polytheism that is incoherent. It does not produce a coherent worldview. And so now as Mormonism has become a world religion, and it's now facing the secularized world, it's come apart at the seams. So let me just, I said this on Twitter yesterday or last night, and I say it to my Mormon friends now. It has always been time, but now more than ever, for you to realize you have a leaderless church. They are cowards when it comes to fundamental realities of male and female. You have a gendered God, for crying out loud. God's a physical male. He has sex parts. He creates babies. I mean, you know this. So they're LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters. What? They've totally given in to the entire rebellion. It just said, okay, fine, whatever. And then they have shown themselves to be utterly lacking in discernment. They really think that these religious rights protections mean anything when leftists are in charge? What? I mean, the naivete is astonishing. So I say to my Mormon friends, you need to realize you've been deceived. And it may have been a lifelong deception, but you're seeing it now. Don't do what many of your fellow Mormons have been doing. Many, and you know this, if you're honest with yourself. You know how many names have disappeared. The people who used to be there, they're not there anymore. They're not LDS anymore. Don't do what they've done, where you just throw out faith in God, faith in divine revelation, just because you've been given a counterfeit. There is truth in the historicity of the Christian faith. Just because Joseph Smith made up the entire Book of Mormon and everything that went with it, there was no Zelph the Lamanite. Okay? Recognize and put all that stuff off. Look to real Christianity that takes the Bible seriously. You know, the people that are standing against this stuff, the people are saying, no, we cannot go there. We will suffer what it takes, but we cannot and will not go there. Because God has made man in his image. Male and female. That doesn't mean God has a physical body. That's where you got lost. That's where we are his creatures, and he has defined us by his sovereign power. And no acts of Congress or Jerry Nadler can change what God has done. And Jerry Nadler is going to discover that sooner or later. And he's going to have a lot to answer for. But I just say to my Mormon friends, you know that what I'm saying is true. You know, you've seen the changes. You've seen the changes. What are you going to do about it? What's going to happen?